white South Africans are expected to arrive in the country out of 8,000 or so applications. How is this being received in the U.S.? Are there concerns, particularly by refugee advocacy groups, for example?
Well, refugee advocacy groups, of course, find it utterly astonishing that a Trump administration that would close America's doors almost wholesale to refugees from all over the world, because that is, in essence, what President Trump has done in the weeks since he returned to the White House on January the 20th, would throw America's doors open for one group of people, Afrikaner farmers, based on a false statement that the president has made about the Expropriation Act. He argues that those farmers are being dispossessed of their lands without compensation. He also argues more broadly that white Afrikaner farmers are suffering human rights abuses at the hands of President Ramaphosa's government. And of course, the United States government chides President Ramaphosa for the position that South Africa took at the ICJ, accusing Israel and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of war crimes. But it is an extraordinary moment for the United States to be opening its doors to refugees whose processing time for transition to a new life in America has been fast-tracked to just 3 months, where the standard processing time has been 18 to 24 months, and that was before Donald Trump shut America's doors. I think it's fair to say that most Americans don't really know this is taking place, and it's curious that the government wants to send apparently this delegation of US government officials to Dulles Airport to welcome the first Afrikaners as they fly in, because that will certainly raise visibility of this within the United States, and it's not clear that the American public will necessarily back it. I mean, Republican Trump voters don't want anybody coming in. They want America's doors shut, and they certainly aren't particularly literate in the politics of South Africa. And Democrats, of course, will say, well, if you're letting white Afrikaner farmers into the United States, why are the doors closed to so many other deserving people who have applied for refuge in America? But it's an astonishing symbol of how low the bilateral relationship between the two countries has fallen, and we'll wait to see when these planes are going to arrive, when these people are going to arrive, and what level of welcome they are provided by the Trump administration.
Simon Marks is our Washington correspondent. Simon, thanks very much indeed. And just to note, government officials in South Africa say they are working on a response, also rejecting the idea that Afrikaners are being targeted.
The president has shown support for South African refugees that are coming to the United States next week. Can you talk about what these refugees are fleeing and why this is a priority for the administration?
Well, the president has actually signed an executive order on that matter. My office can get it back to you, Michael. But this group in South Africa.
Refugees that are coming to America soon, I just want to let you know, as someone whose wife is Afrikaans, who's been to South Africa multiple times, you're going to have a bad time. There's no white genocide happening in South Africa. You have crime that's happening as a result of racism-fueled generational economic inequality, the same thing that's happening in America. We're just a couple decades ahead of you on the unchecked capitalism timeline. But I have good news for you. You don't have to worry about the cheap exploited labor rising up against you anymore, because now that you're in America, you'll get to be the cheap exploited labor. If you were middle class or upper middle class in South Africa and you come to America, you're poor now. Like, really poor. You're not going to have maids and gardeners and personal servants that you can pay $15 a day for. Now you get to be the cheap labor. But by all means, please come to America and experience the American capitalism that Elon Musk's been raving about to you. You'll probably love it. You know, what do I know? There's probably very little chance that you'll end up going back to South Africa in a year or two after realizing how overpriced and fucked up America is. I wouldn't even worry about that as a possibility. And if you think I'm being mean to these people because I think they're a bunch of racist, bigoted colonizers who wish they could go back to apartheid South Africa, it's just because I do think that. But to them, I say, welcome to the American dream. Please let me know when you've woken up from it.
administration has officially granted more than 50 white South Africans refugee status in the U.S. Kate Bartlett reports from Johannesburg. The Afrikaners are expected to land in the U.S. next week.
The group of white South Africans could arrive at Dulles Airport as early as Monday, three sources with knowledge of the matter told NPR, which has also seen an email confirming the arrangements. The sources all work for the US government, so did not want to be named out of fear of retribution. This comes just 3 months after President Trump signed an executive order claiming Afrikaners face persecution in South Africa and could apply for refugee status in the United States. Afrikaners are the descendants of mainly Dutch colonists. The South African government says there is no evidence they are being persecuted and has accused the US administration of being taken in by disinformation. For NPR News, I'm Kate Bartlett in Johannesburg.
Africans are now given refugee status in the U.S. And as somebody who comes from a country that has been hosting white South Africans for the past decade now as they're seeking refuge, I just want to tell you, and you can ask Australians and Kiwis about this too, because white South Africans have been moving in massive numbers to Australia and New Zealand. So they know what I'm talking about. When white South Africans move to white majority countries, which the U.S. is, they start thinking that because it's a white majority country, that it's a safe space to say inflammatory things about black South Africans. So just an FYI, get ready for that.
Are saying only 49 Afrikaner refugees on the first flight to America. Only 49, it's so few. But remember, in 2022, Charlize Theron reported that there were actually only about 44 Afrikaans speakers left in the world, which means they've actually gone up from 44 to 49. They found 5 more. That's an 11% population increase. In just 3 years, the Afrikaner population has exploded. Well done, guys.
Afrikaners, South African, they're going to America as refugees. Who are Afrikaners? Afrikaners, they're basically Dutch descendants. They came the time of, should I say around 1800, 1900, when Africa was known as like a vast mass of land and people were trying to discover it, especially the West. And when the Dutch came in South Africa, of course, they found this beautiful land and they colonized the locals, the natives. Of course, there was this tribal war, the village war between the Zulus with the Dutch. Unfortunately, the Zulus were defeated by the Dutch, and of course, Dutch, that is the Afrikaners, who are right now known, as Afrikaners. They took over their land and South Africa, and they ruled for a couple of 50 years, 60 years, even more than that. And and they had this apartheid regime where they discriminate according to color. If you're black, brown, white, they say you go where based on your color. So the types of job you get also determined by the skin of your color. Where you live determines the skin of your color. Education wise, the same thing. So everything was being done according to your race. And of course, the whites, that is the Afrikaners, of course, they got the better jobs, they got the better housing, they got better living standard, they got the best businesses, and literally the system favored them. And right now in South Africa, if you go, white South Africans, they are literally the ones who are rich right now. When the time of Mandela, when they got the independence, of course, and they abolished the apartheid, and of course, so there was this one government where now recognize everybody. That is the Mandela ANC and Mandela presidency, and Mandela came out and proclaimed to the whole world that South Africa is a rainbow nation, and where everybody is accepted, whether you're white, black, brown, everybody, as long as you're South African, you're welcome. And of course, other people from the other parts of the world, they're also welcome. And apartheid was abolished. The late President Nelson Mandela became the president of South Africa, and for a while things were looking rosy, but the reality is, under the ground, under the background, most black South Africans were living below the poverty line. Most black South Africans, most of them were not educated. Most black South Africans, they were jobless. Most black South Africans, they were literally could not afford even living in a house. They used to live in the slums. So When apartheid was abolished, when Nelson Mandela became the president, when everybody was smiling and celebrating, unfortunately, the blacks, they were complaining. They wanted their land back. They wanted to be given jobs. They wanted to be given good housing. They wanted to be able to take care of themselves and their family. And that is the reality of what happened in South Africa and what is currently happening in South Africa. So what did the government do? They introduced policies that are going to help the Black South Africa be able to get education, the Black South Africa to be able to get a job after education, and be able to take care of himself and his family. And for a while, everything was working out very well. But come this fast forward 20, 30 years down the line, most of majority of the Black South Africans, majority of them, 3/4 of them, they are literally poor. They're fighting poverty, and the types of jobs which are available, if you're not educated, you not get it. The scarcity, the jobs are there, but the demand is very high. The population of people who have finished school, it's a lot, but the jobs available, it's very limited, and that is where the problem comes in. And now people are frustrated, and now it has boiled over. And you realize some people are lashing out, and they are claiming that, you know what, we need to get our farms back. We need to have our farms back so that we're able to, to cultivate the land, we're able to afford. And now there's that back and forth between the people, between the blacks, the whites. There's this problem where, of course, there's clash here and there, where people are fighting over one or another. Maybe there's burglary, maybe there's robbery somewhere. Of course, there are some issues with the land, where some people are complaining about the whites taking over the land. There have been those issues, which is the fights, they happen all over the world. They're happening in countries. But now for South Africa, it's different, because they have this history, and they have not come up with a long-lasting solution. And it's like a boil that is thriving, that is about to burst, and nobody is having a solution. Nobody is having a clear way on what to do. And that is basically what's happening in South Africa, because there's so much anger among the blacks South Africans, where they're looking at their government and they say, you need to do something about this situation, because the blacks are suffering while the whites are literally enjoying and thriving this country. While the white South Africans, they are saying, you know what, we've been in this country for more than 100 years. We also deserve to be part of and parcel of this country, and this is our country, we want to enjoy it. So there's that back and forth. Only time will tell what's going to happen next. Let me know what you think about what's happening. Drop your comments.